Hi, I'm John Vorperian, and this is Beyond the Game. Well, whether it's opening day, the All-Star Game, the World Series, there was a time when we had count them, three major leagues. On the left coast was the Pacific Coast League, and in 1956, the LA club was really the Bilko Athletic Club. Steve Bilko was a screaming slugger. In the minor leagues, he did come up to the show several times, but just didn't make it there. So to explain what and who Steve Bilko is, it's indeed a pleasure to have a real baseball historian in the studio. I'd like to introduce now Gaylon H, the author of the Bilko Athletic Club. So without further ado, Gaylon, welcome to Beyond the Game.
Thank you, John.
I see that you're wearing a jacket which is representative of a LA Angel?
Marino Peretti was one of the veteran pitchers on the 56 Angels. He had a long career in the Coast League. He was from the San Francisco area. To this day, there is a group of players, old ball players and other fans, who meet on the third Wednesday of every month in Marino Peretti's honor. He's been dead since 1981.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So Marino Peretti was one of the what I call in the book Grump's old men, and
Mm-hmm.
Grump was the manager, Bob Sheffing. That was his nickname, and he had a mixture of oldsters and young pitchers. Marino Peretti was one of the veterans. Dwight Red Adams, who went on to become a very successful pitching coach for the Dodgers, was one of the others. And then they had a fellow by the name of Harry Perkowski, who had quite a few years in the major league. So they were Grump's old men.
All right, Grump's old men, but what caused you to focus on Steve Bilko?
I interviewed Steve Bilko in 1976 as part of a book that I had in mind at that time on players who had great minor league careers, but were either flops in the majors or didn't achieve the greatness that everybody thought they would. Bilko was sort of the poster boy of that group. I became very fascinated with him, interviewed him in 1976, as I said, and he died 18 months later. One of the reasons I focused on Bilko was I grew up in the Los Angeles area. I was 9 years old when he arrived in town in 1955. To me, he was Babe Ruth. And I found in writing this book that I wasn't the only one who felt this way. Bobby Grich, who went on to have an all-star career with the Baltimore Orioles and the California Angels, he describes Bilko as Ted Williams, Babe Ruth, and Mickey Mantle all rolled into one. And Bobby Grich, in terms of his treatment of fans, signing autographs, he said he always remembered Steve Bilko getting his first autograph from Steve Bilko when he was 7 years old. So Steve Bilko had a huge impact on kids growing up in the LA area, and I was never really satisfied with a lot of the stories about Bilko. A lot of them focused on his weight. He was a big guy. He was a big guy in an era of thin ball players. And so that's why I did the book. And in doing the book, I found out that the 56 Angels team was made up of a bunch of interesting human interest stories. And so that was why the Bilko Athletic Club came about.
So I take it you spent many a day at the local ballpark?
Wrigley Field was the name of the ballpark, and actually it was the first Wrigley Field. When the LA Wrigley Field was built in 1925, the one in Chicago, which had been built many years earlier, was known as Cubs Park. It was renamed Wrigley Field in 1926. So Wrigley Field was known as a $1 million palace. It was just like the one in Chicago. Actually, it was built with the intent of being better than the one in Chicago. It had brick walls, it had ivy on the walls. It had a clock tower, which was a World War I memorial. It seated around 25,000 fans, which was a lot for a minor league ballpark at that time. And some of the greatest players in baseball history have played in Wrigley Field, from Ted Williams to Joe DiMaggio to the Wainer brothers.
Wow. Now, was that a hitter's park or a pitcher's park?
It was a hitter's park, just like the one in Chicago. You didn't have the wind, however. In '56, the Angels played a lot of day games. Phil Wrigley wanted Major League Baseball to come to the West Coast, and he didn't. While this ballpark had lights, the one in LA had lights, he wanted them to play a day games. Also, he was trying to get retired folks to get them to come out to the ball games, because the LA Wrigley Field was in a neighborhood that he thought at night games might discourage people from coming. So playing in the day, the air was a little lighter. And for that reason, the Angels hit 202 home runs that year as a team. They had 6 players who hit 20 or more home runs, and Bilko hit 55.
You know, people who are just tuning in are going to be hearing Bilko, and, you know, they may think of Steve Martin or Phil Silvers, and it's clear that the Los Angeles Angels of the PCL were embraced by not only youngsters like yourself in the community, but the entertainment industry.
Bilko was the biggest celebrity in LA in 1956. In fact, manager Bob Sheffing has a quote where he says that more people in LA know Steve Bilko than Marilyn Monroe.
Wow. So here it is. We had up a photograph of Phil Silvers and the ball player. What is the connection? Who came first, so to speak? The television show? Or
the television show was debuted in September 1955. And the name for the character, Bilko, was, there's different accounts of how it happened. One of the screenwriters for the show was Neil Simon. Nat Hiken was a producer. Both were big baseball fans, and both were Bilko fans. Now, Phil Silvers later on was quoted as saying that he could have chosen Corporal Hodges, as in Gil Hodges, or he could have chosen Stan Musial's name as the character. But he thought that Bilko needed it more than the other two.
Well, Bilko, I guess the fact that he was went yard when he came to the plate, and just powered that ball out of the park, whether it be in L.A. or elsewhere.
Well, he hit 313 home runs in the minors, and he hit 76 home runs in the majors in 600 games. So wherever he went, he hit home runs. The thing about Bilko, he didn't hit obviously as many home runs in the majors as he did in the minors. But people went to games to see Steve Bilko either hit a home run or strike out. Ron Shelton, the producer of Bull Durham, his family would drive 200 miles to L.A. to see Bilko do either one, and they felt satisfied no matter what he did, because it was just worth seeing Bilko swing the bat.
Wow. Just speaking about swinging the bat, years of seeing this, but can you talk a little bit, because we are beyond the game, I'd like to talk a little bit about fashion with regards to the Los Angeles Angels. I noticed the pronounced
stripes.
Stripe, yes.
Those were known as the waffle weave uniforms. Max West and Ralph Kiner had a sporting goods store in nearby Alhambra. Max West had been a star for the Angels, Coast League, also played in the majors with the Boston Braves. He came up with the idea of having a uniform that had some ventilation. It was also inspired, however, by the UCLA Bruins uniforms of 1955. UCLA had played in the Rose Bowl. They had a great team, and they had a star tailback named Sam Brown. And Sam Brown was an All-American tailback. During his days at UCLA playing football, he was known as First Down Brown. With the Angels in spring training in '56, he became known as Home Run Brown. He needed some seasoning in the outfield, so the Angels sent him to the lower minors to get that. Unfortunately, he was drafted by Uncle Sam. That was during the years of the military draft, and he never played in a game in professional baseball. And of course, he never played for the Angels. But he was seen in spring training as a top prospect.
Wow. Now, Bilko, we're talking about the '56 experience. He garners the Triple Crown, but he came up as a 20-year-old to the show?
1949, during the heat of a pennant race with the Dodgers, he came up through the Cardinals organization. He'd had some great performances with the Rochester Red Wings. He came up and he did quite well near the end of the season. The Cardinals lost out to the Dodgers, but there was great promise for him in 1950 at spring training. In fact, at spring training, Fred Sy, the owner of the Cardinals, said to sports writers that Bilko would make them forget Lou Gehrig.
Wow.
He was also compared with Jimmy Fox, Johnny Mize, and of course, because of his build, he stood 6'1". He weighed anywhere, he was listed at 230. His usual playing weight was 254. He admits to playing as heavy as 270. He became so sensitive about his weight that he refused to answer reporters' questions as to what it was. He would just tell them somewhere between 200 and 300 pounds.
But you talked with him on several occasions. What do you think was the formula that he just wasn't able to repeat his numbers that he was doing at the minors versus the majors?
Right. I think there was something that Jim Brosnan, who wrote a couple of very fine books, The Pennant Race and The Long Season, really the first books that got inside the clubhouse. Jim Brosnan was a teammate of Steve Bilko in 1955. They were also roommates on the road. Brosnan compared Bilko with Ferdinand the Bull in that he wasn't quite sure of himself. He was introverted. He was a shy man. Brosnan also observes that most great players have a certain amount of arrogance. And Bilko was not an arrogant man. He was very confident, but he wasn't arrogant. In L.A., he was comfortable. He was a celebrity. He wasn't real comfortable, however, with the celebrity status. He preferred to watch Lawrence Welk on TV or roller derby. John Wayne was a friend, but he says of John Wayne, he was like other folks. He did not, for example, like he attended a press party for the Phil Silvers television show, but he wasn't comfortable going. In fact, he turned down an invitation to go there, and if it hadn't been for George Freese, his best friend in the 56 Angels, he wouldn't have gone to the press party. So he was a very introverted guy. He was quite comfortable going back to Nanticoke, Pennsylvania at the end of the season if he wasn't playing winter ball. He was from Nanticoke, Pennsylvania. He was, of course, a hero there, and he became a genuine hero in L.A.
He always played one position only?
He was a first baseman. However, when the Los Angeles Angels came into being as a major league team in 1961, Bilko was in the starting lineup at Wrigley Field. They wanted his bat in the lineup because at Wrigley Field he was known as the home pro. He played right field. Ted Kluszewski was at first base. The Angels in 61, on the top of their caps was a halo. When Bilko showed up for opening day there at Wrigley Field, he saw the cap with the halo, and he joked with the clubhouse boy, well, what have you done? Put a target on top of my head so the ball would hit it? He had a great sense of humor.
Now, we have a number of illustrations here, and there's one that sort of, I know that your book, Gaylon's titled The Bilko Athletic Club, so I would think it would replicate the Earl Weaver school of thinking, just get your men on base, let's go for the 3-run home run. We got Steve Bilko, but there's a snapshot here, which I want to share with viewers. Is this more indicative of the Los Angeles Angels?
This
of
is
the 50s?
Gail Wendy Wade. He came up through the Dodgers organization. He was an outstanding football player in high school. In fact, he says that if he'd gotten a scholarship offer from Notre Dame, he would have never put on a baseball uniform. Now, Gail never made the transfer from being a football player to baseball player. He played the game like a football player. He was known for his cross-body blocks, taking out second baseman. In fact, in spring training with the Dodgers, in an inter-squad game with Jackie Robinson, there was a big fight between Robinson and Wade because Gail Wade threw a cross-body block into Jackie Robinson, knocked him about 10, 15 feet into the outfield. Jackie Robinson was a former football player at UCLA. Gail Wade was a football player. There was a good fight.
Now, did the PCL step in and do some alteration to...
Late in the 56 season, they issued a ruling against crossbody blocks. Gail was still throwing them in 57. He was still in the league in 1957. Gail Wade is a very interesting story. His career ended when he was hit in the head right near the temple by a fastball from Mo Drabowski, who had been his roommate with the Cubs. A few months prior to getting hit in the head, he had lost his wife to cancer. So that is a very interesting story.
Wow. This 56 image, again, it just, I guess, shores up the point that these Angels, the Bilko Athletic Club, really had a connection.
Well, you're looking at Pat Boone and Shirley Jones here with Gail Wade on the far left and Steve Bilko. Nat King Cole was also a big fan of the Angels. In fact, at the end of the season, there was a big party at the Coconut Grove, and Nat King Cole sang there, and obviously he sang the song Unforgettable, which the 1956 season was. It was an unforgettable season for these players. They had career years. Most of them had joined the Angels as cast-offs. They had been with the Cubs, sent down to the minors. Bilko had been sent to the Angels in '55 because he couldn't cut it with the Cubs. Bob Speak, who was another outstanding ball player for the '56 Angels, had been sent down after having a pretty good '55 season with the Cubs. So it was a team of cast-offs, also some very young, talented prospects who were on their way up. So this mixture, they put together this great year and therefore became what, in my opinion, is baseball's last great minor league team, because expansion came in 1961. The Coast League, as we knew it for most of its history, was no longer in '58 because the Dodgers came to L.A. and the Giants to San Francisco.
Now, you mentioned one of the teams, I think Bilko actually played for the Angels, the expansion club, and he also did a stint with the Bums.
Well, Bilko had several different gigs in L.A. His first 3 years, of course, were with the Coast League Angels. That's '55, '56, '57. During those 3 seasons, he had 148 home runs, and that's when Bilko became a household name. He came back in '58 with the Dodgers. The Dodgers were not doing very well. They were drawing pretty well at the gate, but there was a lot of feeling they kind of wished they would go back to Brooklyn. I was one of those who did not want to see the Dodgers come to L.A. I wanted the Angels to stay. I wanted to continue to see games at Wrigley Field. I was not alone among the kids my age. But Bilko was in a trade with the Reds. The Dodgers got Steve Bilko. They gave up Don Newcomb. Now, one of the reasons they traded for Bilko was they were trying to get permission to build a new ballpark at the desired location that was in Chavez Ravine. They were in danger of losing the public referendum. Buzzy Bavasi says that Bilko helped them win that election. They won it by 25,000 votes, and they got their wish, which was to build a Chavez Ravine, and that's where Dodger Stadium is today.
But the Angels, staying with the Pacific Coast League, that's what folks like youngsters like yourself wanted to see?
Yes. Because the reason for that, John, is that all we saw of the so-called major leagues on the East Coast, in fact, it was an East Coast major league. Prior to '58, there were no major league teams west of Missouri. And in fact, up until '55, when the A's moved from Philadelphia to Kansas City, there was no major league team west of St. Louis. We didn't have cable television. We didn't have ESPN. You couldn't get the New York Times on your doorstep the same day or next day. All we had was on the West Coast. And far as we were concerned, going to Wrigley Field there in L.A., seeing many of the stars who had been in the major leagues play at Wrigley Field, or against the crosstown rivals, the Hollywood Stars, and the Hollywood Stars and the Los Angeles Angels rivalry was as big as the Red Sox and the Yankees. So we had our own major leagues. We didn't feel that we needed the Dodgers from the East Coast. Now, we had seen the Dodgers, of course, come World Series time, usually lose to the Yankees. We had seen, of course, the game of the week on television, but all that was in far-off New York. And it truly was East, West was West. The columns, there was a couple of columns that would appear in the LA papers. They were called Eastern Sports. So the major leagues, to someone growing up in the West Coast at that time, it was something in a far-off land called New York. And actually, we viewed New Yorkers, I'm speaking personally here, as quite arrogant. This was the media capital of the world. So we kind of thought what we had was pretty good, and we didn't want to give it up. The other thing to keep in mind too, John, when the Dodgers came out, they played in probably the worst ballpark in the world, the Los Angeles Coliseum. The Dodgers initially said they were going to play in Wrigley Field. So Wrigley Field is a ballpark was rejected more times than some of the players on the 56 Angels.
Now, the president usually throws out the opening day pitch, whether it be in Washington D.C. or Baltimore. I'm shocked. I'm shocked to see this next image. I'm not necessarily saying it's opening day, but it's still 56.
No, this is 61.
Oh, this is 61.
So
Okay.
you asked earlier about the about Bilko. He played with the Coast League Angels, played with the Dodgers in 1958, and then when expansion occurred in 1961 and the American League added the Los Angeles Angels as one of the two expansion teams, the other was the Washington Senators, Bilko was drafted. This shot was taken at spring training, 61, and Dwight Eisenhower is next to Bilko. Ted Kluszewski is on the other side, and Bill Rigney was the manager of that team. That team was known as the Over the Hill Gang, and they had, still to this day, the best record of any expansion team. Bilko hit 20 home runs for the Angels in 56. He hit the last home run at Wrigley Field in 1961. Mudcat Grant was the pitcher. And Mudcat Grant, with 2 outs in the 9th inning, Bilko hits the ball out of the park. That's the last home run hit at Wrigley Field in the only season that it was in the major leagues.
Wow. Amazing career. Amazing. And I have to work this in. There are a couple of shots here that I just want to emphasize the halo. We saw it on the ball caps, but this is an extreme. Can you tell us what's good?
What George Freese, who's pictured here with Bob Sheffing, the manager of the Angels, George Freese in 55 had been with the Hollywood Stars, the crosstown rivals. The Angels picked him up in 56. He played third base for the Angels. His brother, Gene Freese, played third base for the Stars. So when the Angels got George Freese, anytime they could kind of tweak the Stars, kind of stick a little needle in them, they did it. And this particular photograph, which appeared in the LA Times, was a way of doing that.
When the Angels, further down the road, like now, Anaheim, the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, or have I got that right?
I think I can't keep up with it anymore.
I was curious. You still must have some mates that felt like you that the Pacific Coast League forever. With the Yankees going against the Los Angeles Angels, coming actually to the metro LA area, did people mellow out? Did people feel differently once they saw the parade of American League stars?
Well, in 1961, this is when the Angels were now in the American League. This was the year, of course, the M&M boys. This was the year that both Maris and Mantle were chasing Babe Ruth's record at that time of 60 home runs through most of the year. Roger Maris, of course, on the last day of the season hit his 61st. That happened also to be the last day for Wrigley Field as a major league ballpark. The M&M boys did not have much success playing in Wrigley Field. Now, there are some stories as to one of the reasons Mantle didn't have much success is that one of the local DJs kind of entertained him at night, and so therefore he wasn't in the best playing condition. But Mantle did not do well at Wrigley Field. Maris did better, but the Yankees overall lost 6 out of 9 games to the Angels, expansion Angels, at Wrigley Field. The crowds were big. In fact, I remember going to a Friday night game at Wrigley Field against the Yankees. I think the Yankees came back to win that one, but the place was packed. It had a World Series environment. You mentioned earlier President Eisenhower. You showed the photograph. When the Angels made their debut as an expansion team in 1961, former Vice President Richard Nixon, he had just lost the election to John Kennedy. He was there at the game, sat in the same box as Casey Stengel, and Casey Stengel informed him that his wife, Edna, was on the board of a local bank, and if he needed a job, he thought he could help him.
That's good. Again, you mentioned Mantle, Gaylon, and I guess Bilko and the mix paths crossed even in the show, and this is a lovely
This
image
shot,
that you were
right?
able
This
to
shot,
obtain.
this shot was taken in 1958. After 3 great seasons in the Coast League, Bilko was brought up signed by the Red Legs. He actually took a pay cut to play for the Red Legs. This was taken in spring training in '58. In 1956, both players won the Triple Crown. Mano won, of course, the Triple Crown in the American League, and Bilko in the Coast League. There was a columnist in L.A. named Ned Cronin, and that was a presidential year, by the way, 1956. So he proposed that Mano and Bilko run as a president and vice president ticket. And he claims that they would have won. Of course, it was tongue-in-cheek, but it kind of gives you an idea of how popular both were and how their names are linked. Harry Turtledove, the alternative history novelist, award-winning novelist, he was a young boy growing up in L.A., and when I was talking with Harry, he says, you know, I can remember Steve Bilko winning the Triple Crown that year, but I can't remember Mickey Mantle winning the Triple Crown.
What do you do now with regards to pro baseball? Who do you root for? Do you?
I'm a long-suffering Cubs fan, and the Angels in the Coast League were the affiliate of the Cubs. When I wrote this book, the Bilko Athletic Club, of course I know the history of the Cubs and their futility. But in talking with the players, I understood that the Cubs during that period, as they even do today, are what they are because of some very poor management decisions. And it hasn't really changed over time. Mm-hmm. Their brand, their reputation is built on their failure. Mm-hmm. It was true then, and unfortunately it's true today.
Do you think Bilko has gotten all that he deserves from recognition from
No.
baseball?
Unfortunately, Bilko, there's a lot of flip comments that have been made about him over the years. There was a lot of things, I think, that were written without really understanding the situation. Tommy Lasorda says that if Bilko played today, he would hit 50 to 60 home runs, and he caps it all off by saying easy. Mm-hmm. Albie Pearson, who played against Bilko in the Coast League, and then was a teammate of Bilko on the Angels after they entered the American League. He said that Bilko would have hit, if he'd stayed healthy, even in his later years, that he would have averaged 40 home runs a year. Most people agree that Bilko in today's game would be another Babe Ruth. And in some respects, he could have even maybe not been a Babe Ruth in the 50s, but he could have been one of the great major league players if the managers had just left him alone. Part of his success in L.A. were that the managers there let him be Steve Bilko. They did not nag him about his weight. Mm-hmm. They just let him go out and play the game. They told him, you're my first baseman. We're going to go with you with whatever comes, and that's where he really thrived. To give you an idea why this was important, in one game in 1953, he hit 21 home runs for the St. Louis Cardinals in 1953. He struck out 5 times in a 10-inning game. The very next day, he comes back and hits 2 doubles in the same inning. So he could go hot and he could go cold.
Well, you certainly are hot, Gaylon, with your assessment of the Bilko Athletic Club. I want to thank you.
Thank you very much
for taking us beyond the game today, and hope you come back for an encore.
Thank you, John.
And this is John Vorperian saying thank you for sharing this time with us. Take care and see you soon. Bye-bye for now.